Welcome to the latest episode of Indie Kicks on the Comic Binge podcast. I am all alone today. Usually I have my friend Dennis Ramirez today. He could not make it, unfortunately, but it doesn't matter because today I am here joined with my friends Matt and Steph. Hello, everybody.
What's going on, man? How you doing over there?
I'm all right, man. I'm all right. I'm in Seattle, and I think so. Steph, are you in Florida?
I'm in California.
Backwards. I got them backwards. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, Matt, you're in Florida.
Yes, I'm in Florida.
Wow, Florida, that's quite a state, I heard.
But I might, I may as well take up, half permanent residency because I am in Florida that often. I live in California, but I'm in Florida every 4 to 6 weeks usually.
Well, why? If you don't mind me asking, why is that?
So we have a content creation business together called InSymmetry Creations. That is our content creating, comic writing company name, and it's based where Matt is. Matt's home office there. And it's interesting because especially last year during the pandemic, Florida shows were pretty much the only shows going on in the world. Wow. I mean, it's kind of like the Florida Comic-Con scene is very different than any other area I've ever seen. I mean, my area of California, I'm in Central California, and we have like a handful of small cons and then a few. And then, of course, down south there's San Diego Comic-Con. But Florida, you could probably find a show every weekend practically. It's just this, it's especially in Central and North Florida, it's just kind of a hot spot for comic creators.
Wow.
And Comic-Con. So last year when COVID was going on, there were a few shows that were able to find ways to safely happen. And so I was traveling there. So there's a lot of shows, but not just during COVID. I'm traveling there quite often for shows. And Kickstarter fulfillment, that kind of thing.
Oh, so you're that. So you guys are, obviously you guys are separated from distance, and then you guys are still meeting up together to work on this production company. That is amazing. Yeah. That's amazing.
And we, every day, we like to say it's kind of like we're on virtual cubicles. You know what I'm saying? Like we're on video chat, working on our stuff, working on whether it's scripts or promotion or whatever the task is of the day that we need to do. But whether it be shows or Kickstarter fulfillment or Kickstarter promotion, we always try to make sure that we bundle things together so that way stuff's like, hey, I've got this show and that show, and we're doing something for the Kickstarter while I'm there. That way we can make the most of the trips. So because trips obviously cost money.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, like Steph was saying, during the pandemic times, the first show that actually came back was Collective Con Jacksonville in last July. So you're talking 4 months after the pandemic started. There was a Comic-Con in Florida, and it was the show that actually wrote the blueprint for what the shows are that we see right now, where there's going to be social distancing. Everybody's wearing masks. You're going to have sanitation stations taking temperatures. Collective Con Jacksonville was the first show in the country that was able to come back. And they did that. We were there. I was the panel host, so I'm up on stage interviewing people, and Steph was there. We both ran the costume contest for it, and every single person, even if they had a helmet on, still had a mask underneath the helmet, or they had a mask on top of their headpiece. And so it was neat to be able to see people find a way to be able to make things work. Now, I will say this, knowing you're in Seattle, we also understood the first half of it because we were scheduled to be at Emerald City Comic-Con.
No way.
The second issue of Tales from Nocturnia was supposed to debut on the show floor at Emerald City Comic-Con alongside of Richard Rivera of Stabity Bunny, Scoot Comics, because he's actually in the issue. So Richard was going to have us do the debut at his booth at Emerald City Comic-Con. And then Kings County decided they were going to have the first COVID death in the country. And then Emerald City was going to be the first con to get canceled. So we're already feeling the heat, even though we weren't from Seattle, because we were supposed to be there last March.
Yeah, I remember that happened. A lot of people started backing out, and then they canceled it finally. And I was like, oh wow. And I was supposed to go to I don't know if you guys are probably not, I'm not sure if you're football fans. I was supposed to go to an XFL game and got canceled, and I was so bummed.
We're both,
I'm
yeah.
literally wearing a football jersey right now.
Attaboy.
Well, and that was the interesting thing about it. See, I had actually already flown to Florida because I was going to fly to Florida. We were going to take care of business, then we were going to fly together to Seattle. And this was right before. I mean, I think the day that I flew out was kind of when things were a little iffy, and we had a conversation. And I told him, I said, we need to keep an eye on this because I don't know if the show is going to happen. And every day it was like cancel watch. We were going on and saying, are they going to cancel? What are they going to do? And that was the first major indication that, okay, this is something serious with stuff with the sports world.
Right. Yeah.
So like I said, we were driving back from a signing, and I was like, they're never going to cancel the NCAA tournament. And I remember standing in my living room doing like this, shaking in the living room when they canceled the NCAA tournament. And I was just like, I told Steph, I'm like, you just don't understand if the sports world is going to cancel this stuff.
Everything's canceled.
I'm like, this doesn't even make any sense. She wasn't even sure if she was going to be able to get out of Florida and get back.
No
it was just crazy. It was literally like those apocalypse movies where the first thing happens and everybody's just trying to figure it out. I mean, totally remember what it was like for us. We were like, I
was afraid I wasn't going to get home. And then the plane that I was on, there was like maybe 10 other people on it. It just felt like the Twilight Zone episode. And I remember I had a layover in O'Hare and it was empty. It was just, and everything was tired, and it was just, So anyway, we are very familiar with what happened
whole sports
Emerald City that year.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's funny because Washington just had a convention. They call it the Washington State Convention, Comic-Con. And I'm not sure if you guys ever heard, did you guys hear about that at all?
I did actually just heard about it today. Actually, somebody posted about attending.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very last minute. And again, I'm not a big con person, meaning I've gone to cons obviously and everything, but I don't know. I love people. That's not my issue. I just don't like being around like loads of people at one time and they all stink, kind of a thing. For the most part, I don't mind it, whatever. But I just don't want to it's not really, cons aren't my thing. I gravitate towards. That might have to change eventually. But anyway, it just happened. And I was surprised. I only heard about it like literally the week before, but I'm also disappointed because it was on Father's Day. And at least that week,
choice.
Yeah, and it was a whole weekend, but still, I'm like, it's whatever. They needed to get something done. I get it. It was I think they had a couple backouts too. Anyway, like I think I was in a comic store, funny enough, like one day, before the convention, and these guys were talking about it, and they said, you heard Johnny Cates backed out. I guess Danny Cates was going to go, and then he backed out.
Really?
So
Wow.
Yeah,
So what comic book store are you in? There's a reason I'm asking.
Oh gosh, it was in Federal Way, Washington. I wasn't in Seattle.
Okay. I was going to say, because we actually had a comic book store signing in Seattle that got obviously canceled during Emerald City time. So
what comic store was it?
Oh crap! What store was it? Now that I opened my big, you know what? Give me a second. I will tell you.
Talk
amongst yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves.
I
will tell you. I'll come back.
So if you see weird editing on this in the future, people, it's because I forgot to add the cover of the comic you guys did, and I was like, oh crap, I forgot to get that. I got all these other cool things, and I'm like, crap, I forgot to get the cover. I was trying to add it discreetly, and then I just whatever. Doesn't matter. Anyway, but so you guys are here because you guys have made many comics, which is awesome. And I always, first of all, like to praise people who just get content out there and get it completed. Like, I think that's, and I don't mean like disrespectfully. I mean like 100%. I respect it, and it should be admiration, because to get anything completed out there, art form, whether it be movies, TV, comics, doesn't matter. It's important to get it completed, and I just commend you guys, because I've for years wanted to get music projects done or whatever, and it's hard. And to get anything done and put out there is awesome. And I think it's, for one thing, is awesome and super fun stuff. Like your comic, like Tales of Nocturnia, which I read, was a blast. And especially the last half, I'll say, I really, really liked that last half. It just got really chaotic in a good way. And so for people who I have other pictures and panels and pages I'll show. But behind me is they gracefully let me put the some panels I'll also display as well. So if you see the mayhem behind me, or behind us, I should say, you'll see kind of what you're in for the book. So Tales, you guys have other stuff, which we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I read Tales of Nocturnia because when I was going through your website's very elaborate and very in a good way. I mean, like I was like, wow, this is like legit. Like I was going, okay, I'm gonna pick up some comics, and I went, oh, this is like a whole. This is not just a comic thing. This is an event.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's exactly what we try to make it be, is an event happening. That way you feel like you can be, become a part of what you're looking at instead of just, here's a list, pick something and buy.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to add something to that, Steph?
Well, we have a lot of support merch that we have with our Kickstarter campaigns, which of course we can talk about in a little bit. So we have, it makes it fun when we're doing booths at a con. We could just display all our books and have that be that, but we want to catch people's eyes, and we want to have something available for anybody that's at the show. And so we have a lot of fun support merch for sure. Yeah.
And Mike, sorry to interrupt there. Question is, do you think that helps you when you sell it at the cons? Does that help kind of generate people to come in? Like, because you bring up a great point I never even thought about. Because again, I'm so new to all this stuff as far as selling, independent comics to a convention. And this is good stuff for people who are, like maybe like myself or someone else that wants to eventually get into that. You said, like, do you find that helps? Because I would think like, here's my comics, but like you guys are, no, we have, you guys, it's a whole event that you guys are doing, which is really interesting. So do you think that helps you?
I think that one of the things that has worked well for us is because, for our steampunk comic, Heirs of Isildur, the tagline for it is where steampunk comics and metal collide. So we have to have things that appeal to the steampunk crowd, the comic crowd, and the metal crowd. And it organically is there. It's not like we're just like, let's just get a Beanie Baby and slap our logo on it. Or let's just get some random, tchotchke junk and put it out here and just slap a logo on it. Sure. We try to make sure that the things we have out there organically make sense with what our titles are, so that if somebody wants to expand out from what the book is, that they can. There's been times though, we printed up some coins for Nocturnia. We actually have these really heavy duty coins for Nocturnia. And there's been some shows we've sold more coins than comics. We've had shows where we've sold more CDs than comics. You just never know. You just never know what the thing is you're going to sell. And I would say, we've had talks about this, that sometimes it might make it a little bit more overwhelming because, and Steph will bring up all the time about menus. You don't go into a restaurant. Restaurants don't have 12 pages of menus. Now they have,
unless it's Cheesecake Factory, then they're the culprits.
Yeah. You've got 8 items you're going to order, and you have 8 choices, and that's it. So sometimes we might have a little too much, but we have seen, there's not a thing that we put on our table that has not sold. There's not something up to that hasn't drawn people's attention in.
That's cool.
And that's the thing that we're like, hey, if it's going to sell, why would we not put it out there? Because if people want to buy a t-shirt, we're going to have shirts.
Yeah.
If they want to buy a leather baby dragon head, we're going to have leather baby dragon heads. It is what it is.
Yeah, we have some great stuff. Well, the nice thing is too, especially on a Sunday afternoon of the con, and you've had the people that have been there all weekend. Sometimes by the time they make it to your booth, they'll say, oh, that sounds really great, and your book sounds great, but I spent all my money already. Yeah. Well, we have stickers and trading cards, and if it's something that gets into their hands and reminds them of us later on, they can go back to our website and get our stuff. You never know. And it makes good bundle deals as well. You can bundle a comic and a CD, or whatever the case may be.
That's a great point. And that's one thing I totally can sympathize with, because I'll go to places and blow my money, because I'm the kind of person that I blow my money within the first day, of any con or right away. And then I'm like, oh God, dang, I should have, but that's a great point to like say, hey, here's something free that's kind of cool or whatever, or cheap or super mega cheap, that it's not a super commitment to buy. And it reminds them to do that. That's a good call. That's a good call. It's funny because I come from, again, the music world, underground music world. And we talked a little bit about that before that we recorded. And I can, I could totally get like selling shirts, like you said, Matt, and selling like buttons or things like that, like, for these things, because it's fun. It makes it more fun, to invest in something. And I totally think that like having those things is nice, kind of a badge of honor, and that's what a button is, obviously a badge of honor, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, it's cool to have something like that, to have people invest into what you're doing and to kind of show people that you really care about what you're doing too. I think that to me tells tells everyone that you guys care about the product you guys are doing as a whole, which is really important. I mean, if you're like, I just threw this out here and I just whatever, and it's just, which is fine if you can do that, you can, and you have the money to do that, it's fine. But to show, I think it does show people that you really do care about the material as a whole. And that does go a long way for people. So that's really cool. But yeah, I just kind of going, we got connected and I was going through things and I was like, man, this is like super elaborate. And it kind of blew me away. I was really surprised and impressed everything that was going on. And so, as I'm reading the comic and I started thinking about the show, I started thinking like, how do these people, because you guys, I read your bios on the comic on Tales of Nocturnia. And again, I didn't memorize them completely verbatim, but I remember I read D&D role playing on there, and I know you guys are avid DVD players, right?
That would be me, yes.
Okay. So that not you, Matt, but Steph. Okay, so I guess where does the okay? Backtrack here. Where did you guys first write comic books? And I don't know if it was Tales of Nocturnia first or was it something else first, but how did you guys get into writing comics in the first place? And you guys, it doesn't matter whoever goes first.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steph.
I've actually wanted to be a writer ever since I was a kid. It's always been, I was in journalism and was really into creative writing, and life happened and got in the way. And then once my kids got a little bit older, I said, you know what, I really want to do this writing thing. I really want to look into it. And I had realized that a lot of the stories I had going on in my head, I was picturing as comic form. Okay. I got into comics a little bit later in life, and when I say that, I mean I didn't read them as a kid. I was more like late teens, early 20s before I started reading comics. But that was a really great time for me to get into them because that's what influenced my the stories that I wanted to tell. Mm-hmm. So I took some time to learn how to write comic scripts. Mm-hmm. And surprisingly, I think a lot of people are under the misconception that you can just sit down and just write up a comic, but there's a whole way to do it. You have to write a script a certain way. You need to be descriptive and break down panels and pages for your artist, unless you're drawing it to yourself, which is rare, so that your artist knows how to convey what's in your head.
Totally.
So I wrote a graphic novel script. I started off big, which of course I tell people not to do now.
Yeah.
And then I came across an online comics competition called Ghost City. And they had a category for a one-page comic. And I thought, that sounds like fun. That's a challenge. I can easily do a one-page comic, and I can afford it because it's cheaper than. So I ended up getting finalist with that one. And from there, just sort of got ingrained in the comic community.
I hadn't unmuted myself. So, so my question is, this is why I love these origin questions. Where did you go to learn to write comics? Like, so if someone's out there watching this, and again, the one person that's like, I really want to write comic books, where did you go and where would you recommend to go for them to get started on that?
So I had two friends, one that was actually working on a graphic novel script at the time, and another that was kind of learning the ins and outs of writing. And they kind of were coming from two different places. One was writing the comic script, and another was more screenplays. And so the very first book that they recommended to me, which I had actually, when I had Googled and tried to figure out, what's the best resources, was gosh, now I can. Now, of course, the name escapes me. But it's Brian Michael Bendis' book. Words for Pictures.
Yeah.
That was the first book that I read, and I highly recommend that. His method of breaking down exactly what you need to do to write a script, and he gives examples and the reasons why, it helped me out immensely. And that's from awesome. There, I also read a few screenwriting books just for breaking down the beats of your story. I learned Save the Cat's a big one that I read that kind of teaches you how to do the note card method, where you're kind of lining it up like a storyboard, and so that's how I very, very, very first started. And then later on I met Matt, who could be a spokesman for Google Docs and Google Sheets, and graduated up into a more technological way of doing things.
That's awesome.
That's how I started.
That's awesome, Matt. Now, so I know you guys co-write the comic book. Now, what about you? Did you write comics before, or was this your first foray into comic books?
So I actually, you know, as we talked before we got on, I grew up in the metal world, and I was in a band that toiled in the underground for many years. We put out like 5 CDs, and we it got to a point where we were right there on the cusp. We had some major labels, a major label in Germany that was wanting to sign us, but this is right when the digital revolution started happening, and labels didn't know how to monetize MP3s and digital music. And every time we talked to a big label, then we wouldn't hear from our contact anymore. And we kind of felt like it was grinding to a halt in a sense where we couldn't go any farther. And I just got tired of the industry and everything as a whole.
I can sympathize with that, my friend.
Yeah. So like, you know, I took a quote unquote break for about 8-10 years in that range. And, it was probably about 8 years, but I always had that knack to want to write. I always, you know, would write little bits here and there. Corey Steger and I, who was the original guitarist in Under Oath in 2012, tried to get Heirs of Isildur musically off the ground then, but we always used to say it was like waves crashing on the beach, where here comes a wave crashing in and then would trickle out to nothing, and next thing you know, it's back to nothing again. But in 2015 going to 2016, I was like, you know what, I really want to get back to doing this, but I want to do more than just music. I wanted to do music, but I wanted there to be more of a backstory to it, because I always wanted the universe to be bigger than just the song. I always felt like it was such a shame that people would write songs and, we did all this work to put this album together, and you may only hear 1 or 2 songs, nobody knows the lyrics, and you're like, why'd you go through all this effort to do all this? And it just completely just becomes invisible and disappears. So I wanted there to be more. So I felt like my life was allegorically taking a steampunk vibe, because I was going back and pulling pieces from old songs that were not used, and repurposing them and turning them into new music. So I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of where my life is in that respect. So let's use the steampunk aesthetic. And Heirs of Isildur is what came from that. But it started off as a short story, then turned into an ebook, then turned into an illustrated novel. And the first few issues of the Heirs of Isildur story, if you go back and look at the original comics, which are completely out of print now, they were very much like a book that had a couple of pictures illustrated in there. Steph and I met. Heirs of Isildur, the first arc, the Crossroads Conundrum, was 11 issues and a metal CD.
Wow.
Steph and I met just after issue 2 came out. And we hit it off immediately, and she was involved in what was happening in one way or another from issue 3, and then gradually growing more and more as we went on. And when we decided to mesh our minds together, it was okay, if you want this to be a comic, they're going to have to do a few things like put word bubbles in here. And she very patiently waited for there to be word bubbles and for me to learn some things that I just didn't have experience with then. And so Heirs, the first arc, even though I completely wrote it, Steph was involved in the production end of it. And from Heirs of Isildur, Tales from Nocturnia, which we'll speak about whenever you want to, that actually spawned out of Heirs of Isildur. Heirs of Isildur is a steampunk time travel series.
Right, I saw that.
People are getting pulled from different eras into this story. One of the people that gets pulled in is a medieval king, the King of Nocturnia. So Nocturnia is actually the story as to what happens to Nocturnia, as you read, after this king mysteriously vanishes. Nobody knows why he vanished. Nobody knows why he vanished, but they still have to deal with the fallout.
Ramifications,
So that was something that she and I wrote completely. We said, hey, we're going to write this thing 100% 50-50. We have other projects that we had written 100% 50-50 as well. We have a brand new story that's going to be coming out on Scoot, which is a sub-imprint of Scout Comics, called Misfits Clubhouse, which is, as you can see the image that's behind us, there's a lot of blood and guts and violence in there. Misfits Clubhouse is the absolute 80-degree turn from that. Totally silly. We get to be as ever been, as ridiculous as we've ever been, as all ages as we've ever been. So we get to kind of hit on every different demographic own mind, with stuff we're doing.
That's great. Yeah. And I think that's one thing about comics is really weird for me, that especially independent comic books, a lot of people write for themselves, which is totally fine. And it's usually kind of generated towards, a more older audience. I don't want to say adults, it's whatever, I'm not an adult. I'm almost 40 and I'm not an adult, whatever. So, but the thing is, I just don't. I don't. And again, maybe it's my all ages music background, Matt. Like we and I know you probably are big on all ages venues back in the day. I don't like to alienate like younger audiences, and not saying like you should write for them, like write. And I don't like to write down. That's not what I'm saying either. I'm saying just make it accessible, like meaning like they can read it and be like, oh, they don't have to be like, but don't look at panel number 5, please. That's inappropriate. Like I don't want to do that.
Have you been at our table at shows? I feel like
we say that all the time to people. Yeah,
it's good.
With Heirs of Isildur, there's no. I mean, there are some heavy subject matter in it. There's some characters that struggle with some pretty heavy adult themes, but not adult in that way.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so there's no swear words in it or anything. And so the thing that we like to tell parents when they come up, because steampunk appeals to a younger audience a lot of times too, kids like it. And so we tell them that, and we say, if you have this sitting out on your coffee table and little Johnny comes up and opens it up, you're not going to be like, oh no,
right
close it right now.
Yeah,
Nocturnia obviously is a little more violent, but
yeah, it's a little more. It's a little, but I think it's. See, and my parents
fantasy violence though, so
right, and like I would say it's over the top, like, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but at all. It's over the top, cartoony violence. It's like really fun, and and my mom specifically, not as much my dad, was very liberal with art. Like she did not really censor art to me. Maybe she should have sometimes. I mean, I grew up. I always tell a story, and people probably listen to my old podcast or listen to me talk about this. They're probably ready to shoot me at this point. But I grew up on The Dark Knight Returns. Literally, like I have an older brother who was 6 years older than I was. So in '89, when the Batman movie was coming out, my brother brought home at one point The Dark Knight Returns, and I'm looking through it. It's a brilliant, beautiful piece of art. Form medium of comic books, but it's not necessarily meant for a kid who's like in kindergarten, first grade, and my parents are like, oh, it's Batman, it's fine, as we're watching Batman 66, and you have exactly. It's not, I mean, and again, but at the same time, I respect my mom that she did that, but like, I think what you're saying is right. I don't think having things that like are heavier matter is necessarily a bad thing. Again, that's me as a parent, and I'm saying that everyone does things differently, but yeah, like that's the thing. The biggest thing for me is don't talk down to an audience, just make it accessible for the audience. There's a difference. And I think with comic books, and again, I think this is kind of a detriment. There's a whole different podcast we're gonna get into, but before I get too crazy with this, but it's all about, it's comics are always like, oh, that's the little kid medium. That's like, it's fully for kids. And that's a misconception that I'm hoping that's slowly getting away, finally kind of, becoming accessible for everybody. But the problem is it still has that connotation to it. So people always assume, like my parents are like, oh, this Batman comic's fine for my little boy, and that's, again, it's people seem to realize that it's because it's not aimed at kids. I mean, it's bad for kids, but yeah, it doesn't mean comics are all for kids either, So
I can tell you one of the interesting things that we had happen was, as you can see, both Heirs of Isildur, The Crossroads Conundrum, and Tales of Nocturnia have both graduated up to having trade paperback graphic novels of the two series. And as soon as we did the same show, and we were there one time with just comics. The next time we did the show, we had the trade paperback of Heirs, which is a huge trade. It's 268 pages. And people come by and they're like, oh, cool, the book, it's going to display. Well, it had a spine on it. And there were literally people that had never given us the time of day that saw that we had a book with a spine on it. And now it was like the medium we had graduated up a level in medium, and people took us a little more seriously, even though the internal contents were exactly the same.
Wow. That's amazing. See, this is why I love like doing the show, is getting this kind of information, because this is so critical, I think, for like, just not just for the creators, like who we are aspiring to be and everything, and learn, is just kind of understand we're the outside people of the medium, or who are just or it doesn't matter, or whatever, that you're selling, and you're seeing like what people are saying. Like you have the single issues, which I grew up, as you can see, I love comic books. I read single comic books. I read them all. Doesn't matter. But people are like, this will take it more seriously when you have like the trade, the spine, which is whatever, right? It's like, well, doesn't really matter. It's the same content. But
I know for me, I'm this way sometimes too, but I hear it from a lot of people too, is that it's more about the space that they have. It's easier to buy one single trade issue with the whole story arc than to buy, 11 separate issues. We totally get that. I'm running out of shelf space too, so sometimes I have to be a trade waiter, and I feel bad because I want to buy the single issues too. But I'm a huge fan. I'll do both.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do for Star Wars right now. And I know a lot of people, this is kind of controversial for a lot of comic book people, hardcore who are out there, but I'm kind of person that does both of digital and physical. I have no qualms about, I only do physical, I only do digital. It's like I love them all. I love it all. And I think there's a method to everything. Like you said, a great point, Steph. Like space is a huge thing, especially. And this is the thing with comic books that the Comic Binge's model and the whole thing I'm trying to do is to help promote independent creators like yourselves. And not only that, but the medium of comic books in general, and have it be less intimidating. I want to be like the person that goes, where do I start? And it's like, again, I always tell people just jump in, because it's just like, that's how I did it. I just jumped in. I didn't like have someone hold my hand and go, here, do this. But at the same time, it is intimidating when you have like, well, do I just buy single comic books, or what do I do with this? Like you said, where do I put it? I mean, I don't have space to, if they want to invest in one story, do they want to buy 6 separate issues? Again, where are they going to put it? Like, I'm just going to put it in my, it is harder and harder to kind of get those people to kind of get out of their comfort zone and be like, how do I try comic books? And it's, again, I think the digital age is just, it's waiting to blow up, but it just hasn't yet. And I think it's when the medium can somehow transcend this kind of stigmatism of comics, which I think will eventually happen, that's when digital we'll do this. But how we do that, I don't know. But all the things you're talking about are all the same things I think a lot of common, just regular people don't want to read, or at least go into a comic book. And having that physical trade is so much easier to put on with your other books and things like that. Because it's just a regular book, but it's a comic book, right? So I totally get that.
I can tell you one of the things that we have noticed, and that, I don't know every single bit of Steph's purchasing habits, but I pretty much do know what her comic purchasing habits are, because a lot of what we do, a lot of what we do, we buy through their InSym as a company, because we back a absolute metric butt ton of freaking Kickstarters.
That's awesome.
And there's a huge creator community out there. And a lot of times you don't have the money or the ability to be like, hey, I'm going to go buy a physical from this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. So a lot of creators will back digitally, and we sell an incredible amount of digital comics during our Kickstarters, 1 to creators and 2 to people overseas, because overseas shipping right now is insane.
Sure.
So, I mean, nobody wants to pay $37 to ship something overseas. So a lot of what we buy are digital comics, or there'll be a physical copy that'll come with a digital.
Sure.
And
right.
most of us are sitting in front of a computer all day long as it is.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between going to Facebook or going to the news site, or pulling up a digital comic and taking a look at it there? It's right. So it's one of those things where people, I think, are getting a little more conditioned, especially when it comes to the Kickstarter community. And the other thing, that one of the reasons why we really like Kickstarters, and if you've ever seen one of our campaigns, if you haven't, you'll be able to see another one in a couple of months when we get to our next campaign. Yeah, but we have what you talked about. We like to make our pages an event. Our Kickstarters are an event as well, and we like to have things that can involve people, and that is where people really want to feel like, I'm not just getting a book, I'm a part of this project. We have people that are like, are you going to have an ability to get drawn into this comic? Or what's the special item you're going to have here? We actually had in the Tales from Nocturnia 3 and trade, we had some people that were longtime fans or that had gotten drawn into the issues. We actually made them trading cards of their characters. We actually already had a set of trading cards. And then some of the things, hey, we got to this level, we exceeded, holy crap, we got to this next, so we're going to add another trading card. And so like some of our biggest supporters actually had trading cards of themselves, of their character. That's cool. And you aren't ever going to get that going into your local comic shop and picking up a Marvel or DC title. That's not slagging on the local comic shop in any way, because there's a lot of great local comic shops out there. but there are certain people that are never going to set foot in that LCS. They just want to go back you on Kickstarter because they want to get the cool extra stuff that's limited edition that they know, dude, there's only 70 of those things made, or there's only 30 of that cover. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So we found ways to tap into those other markets as well to help grow our fan base.
That's so cool. And like I said, I before I get into talk about like Nocturnia, before we go too crazy here, last thing is I want to ask you about comic books. Is what comics inspired your guys' story, or as far as like for reading, maybe writers, or what was the comic book specifically inspired that or helped you guys kind of create this, not just this story but other things as well, your creations?
For me, and it's not anywhere in the same genre or subject, but one of my big loves is I'm a huge Jeff Loeb fan. So Long Halloween was,
yeah, dude. All right.
I mean, I read it every year at Halloween time, of course, because that's
of course. Yeah.
Long Halloween was for sure a huge influence, and of course the other one was Watchmen. Both of those. With Watchmen, it was. Okay, this is how you can have a novel, basically, graphic novel, in comic form that tells this really in-depth, complex story.
Sure.
And so for sure it was those two for me.
Cool.
And it just from there, just a bunch of Jeff Loeb titles. I just really his writing is what really.
Yeah. Jeff was really quick. Jeff's Loeb story. I've been buying comics since I remember, off and on, but in my early middle school years, but so early mid 90s at this point, I remember that my comic shop in Everett Comics and Cards, had Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale at the show, or at their place. But this is I was only a Marvel guy, and I just started dabbling in Image Comics at the time. But I knew who Jeff Loeb was because I saw his name on X-Force comic books and things like that. Yeah. And I'll never forget, I walked in and just being like, because I went every Saturday pretty much, and to buy comics. And I went in and he's there no one was there. No one was there.
Oh no! Oh my gosh!
But I remember him and I want to say him being Jeff Loeb, but Tim Sale was definitely there, because I remember they said Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, the artist from Death Blow, and I was like, huh. And so I walked in, no one was there, and I just kind of was like, oh yeah, he wrote X-Force. I'm like, you're the guy who wrote X-Force, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, who was Cable's son again? Or who is this guy again? He goes, oh, that's Cable's son. He starts, going off, and I'm like, oh, cool. And I walked off and started looking at comics, and but then him and Tim walked up behind me, and they're just chatting, and like there's like just BSing with me, and they're being super sweet dudes. So it made an impression. I always remember that. Like I always remember Jeff Loeb. So it was a cool.
I love hearing stories like that, because they always say don't meet your heroes, because
I don't do that now. Oh God, no.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but that's why I love hearing stories like that, because then it's like, okay, I'm a fan of somebody that's actually a good guy. Okay, good.
Yeah, there was, even as a kid, and I always consider myself an expert people person, there was only good energy from those two. Even as a kid, I could read that from them. So they were, they purposely went over, I think, to look at comics when I was there, to be like, let's just talk to this kid kind of thing. At least that's the impression I got. Super good dude. But yeah, I do love Jeff Loeb stuff. A lot of his, I've read Long Halloween eons ago, and I need to reread it. So I need to read it for a long time, but I liked it. Matt, what about comic books for you? Are anything specifically that helped inspire you for anything?
So we were doing a show a few months ago, and it was the first time I actually realized, because there's one thing that inspired me in comics, but I always realized, I'm like, there was something that I grew up on that's always been a very obvious thing, and that was Mad Magazine. And if you look at Mad Magazine, it's all illustrated. It's a variety book. And there's all different artists, all different styles, all different kinds of stories and things in there. And I've had a subscription to Mad Magazine when I was like 5. You know what I'm saying? I think I've still got like a ton of old Mad magazines. Sure. Maybe it wasn't 5, maybe I was 8, but I still have a ton of old Mad magazine stuff. But it's funny that I realized that's something that inspires us, because the story that we're doing for Scout Comics, for Scoot, Misfits Clubhouse, the first iteration of that, it's a short story series, is going to be in their variety book called Frontiers.
Cool.
Steph likes to equate it to highlights for kids. I like to say, imagine if Mad Magazine was all ages.
Okay.
and I think that it kind of is going to fit somewhere in between those two.
Cool.
So it's really cool to be able to have something that we're creating
Yeah.
be in a book like that. But then the other thing for me, I was never inspired by a single title or a single line. I used to always take my my youngest daughter into like little comic shows and all that. And I'm like, hey, you come in the door and you buy a ticket to get in, you can get 6 free comics out of the $1 bin or out of the 50-cent bin. Yeah. And she and I always go in there, and our thing was, you can't pick out Marvel, you can't pick out DC. Let's find the most obscure titles that somebody put all their time and effort into, and now they're lost in the 50-cent bin. Let's see if we can unearth some hidden gems and see if we can find stuff. They're like, dang, I can't believe this thing, that fell by the wayside. That's what we always want to do. So those are the things that inspired me to, look at some of these titles and then research it, say, well, is there a reason why this thing may have fallen into? Was it bad story art? Was it the fact that the cover looked great and then the internal art was trash? We would always kind of look analytically at what these things were in the 50-cent dollar bin things, and we always wanted to try and stay out of them.
So wait, so you and your daughter used to do that back in the how long ago was this? Just curious.
I would say this is probably 6-7 years ago, probably between 5 to 7 years ago is when she and I were doing this.
First of all, I have a daughter, and that's amazing. And I want to seriously steal that from you. That's brilliant. And the second thing is, really quick, again, I'm all about diverging into all these different side conversations. Did you find anything that you legitimately like, this is great? Like one thing that sticks out to you, like, this is awesome.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the name, but I definitely know there was a couple of them that I was like, this is really cool. Or I really like the way this is formatted, or I like the way this was lettered. I can't remember anything off the top of my head, but there definitely were some that I was like, I'm like, man, this poor dude, I can't believe this comic is now 50-cent thing, because somebody like P Thug was like, this is my life's dream to put this comic out. And then next thing you know, it's in the dollar bins buried somewhere in a guy's warehouse until he puts the 50-cent boxes back out there.
Well, and again, going back to music, right? Same thing. Like, someone puts out their music and you find it for $1 and you're like, oh, what is this? You play it and you're like, this is amazing. And it's the same thing. And that's the thing. If and when I ever put something out, regardless of what it is, if I ever find it for super cheap, I don't care, because if I made it, I have something that's in a clearance bin. I'm cool, because I made it to the clearance bin at least. Because if I made it to the clearance bin, it means I completed something. So that's kind of that's the way I look at it, and I totally get it. I totally get it. That's a really cool thing, dude. Like, I'm gonna totally steal that. That's great.
You can have it royalty free, man. It's all good.
Oh, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. So again, before we get too crazy here, and you guys have been so awesome, and I could talk for hours about everything. So as you guys could probably tell, but we're gonna talk about Tales of Nocturnia for a really quick second here. And again, I was stupid enough to forget to put the cover on, so I apologize in advance.
It's all good. It's all good.
Excellent. So I just want to post some panels here, and on the Comic Binge, I try to keep it spoiler free, because I want people to come in and invest in your guys' material, because I know you guys have other things as well, but I just want to keep it like people, get a taste of what they're going to get, so they can come support you guys, because you guys deserve to get supported. So Tales of Nocturnia, will you guys kind of explain a little bit? I'm probably going to post some panels while you guys do a quick little synopsis, and then I'll blow myself up that way I can have the panels show up for you guys, and you guys can keep talking. So just tell me about Tales of Nocturnia in a little bit for me.
All right, do you want to start with this stuff, or you want me to start?
You can go ahead and start.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Tales from Nocturnia, what it is, it starts from a point where the king of Nocturnia has disappeared. Nocturnia itself is a complete mess. It's a kingdom in shambles. They've lost their king, they've lost their queen, they've lost their next in command. They have no leadership structure left, and they are facing an imminent invasion from their neighbors in Sinisteria. They are trying to figure out how to move forward in their kingdom. There are some rumors as to where the king, what's happened to the king. Has he been kidnapped? People start looking towards their executioner, Beninock, as maybe Beninock might have some leadership qualities. Unfortunately, Beninock is so distraught by what happened on execution day. The next in command was getting executed because of having an affair with the queen. The queen jumped to her death, right at his feet. He doesn't want anything to do with executing anymore. He just wants to have a simple life. He's sick and tired of it. So we get to follow his journey and this odd juxtaposition of this big hulking executioner that that just wants to do normal mundane stuff. He becomes a babysitter for the Iron Forger at one point,
It's true.
playing dolls with the Iron Forger's daughter at one point. But we get to see the way that things unfold within Nocturnia, some really horrible decisions that are made by the Nocturnians when as they're trying to recover their king that they think has been kidnapped by Sinisteria. There's a lot of, spies and betrayal and underhanded things that happen. And we have a lot of fun with the way that things unfold. One of the things that Steph and I like to do is we like to try and write backwards. And what that means is we want to try and make sure we know what our big plot points are, and then put a lot of little hints to it as, going backwards, so that when a reader reads forward, they may not even see some of these little hints. Then they go backwards and they're like, holy crap, I didn't even know that thing was coming. But then they go back and look and they're like, oh, dude, you guys had it hidden right in front of my face. We had a thing in Heirs of Isildur that there was a big deal thing that happened in like issue 4, and it was so hidden in plain sight, it literally was on the cover of issue 2, and people didn't even realize it.
Yeah, well, that's crazy. Right on. Well, so like I read this, and it's a load of fun. It's so, again, I would say over the top in the best way, and yes, especially towards the end. Like, I mean, it was like I was going through it, and I'm like, okay, and then I was like, oh my gosh, it just it almost like it shifted a whole, even like the I noticed the art and like the inking like shifted a little bit too. At least like maybe I don't want to. I just kind of noticed that too. I'm like, oh wow, okay. It kind of went. I was like, oh okay. It just kind of went. Everything kind of shifted upwards a little bit. I was like, wow, so it's different. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, especially that last part. And Beninock, again, I didn't know how to pronounce his name. I'm like, is it Beninock? I'm like, I think it's Beninock. But yeah, like that was a cool story. And again, like, I'm trying to keep it spoiler free, so people go, if you love, and for me, if I would say how would I sell Tales of Nocturnia, I would say if you like, swords and sorcery, basically fantasy stuff, definitely check this out. Again, I definitely felt like I love all the different world buildings you had. I love the Changeling shapeshifter character. That was again, I don't want to say what happened, but that was probably that was the part where I really started really starting to really hit like a stride for it for me as a reader. But yeah, if you like those kinds of stories, I definitely recommend checking out Tales of Nocturnia. I have not unfortunately read the other stuff, but I'll definitely try to check that out soon. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. And again, if you like, even if you don't like, just kind of quasi comic books, I think this is a great kind of introduction, to be honest. It's not heavy, like, it's not heavy in the weeds, like comic book, if that makes any sense. It's very structurally, easier to kind of get into and just kind of stroll into it. I had it digitally, so I was just kind of you're going up. I'm not going this way like Comixology, but I was going up, and okay, and it was a good quick read, and I mean that in the best way possible. It was not. Yeah. I wasn't like, what's going on here? I'm